Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar that AESC is hosting with our members from the DACH region. So we're delighted to have you here with us today, and I'd like to introduce you now to Karen Greenbaum, the CEO and President of AESC. Karen will be sharing with you information and sharing the insights that we've had from our latest research that we've done, which has taken over 1,000 responses. So Karen, may I hand over to you to share with us the amazing insights we have found?
Absolutely. And delighted to be here today. Hope you'll enjoy this. We're going to do a fast-paced update on our research, and then we'll have a panel following that, just to give you an idea of our members. Here's a picture of everybody who's a member in the DACH region. I do want to remind you that if you have any questions, we'll be taking them at the end, but Claire will be monitoring the questions as we go along. So please make sure you ask your questions as we go along. We'll take all of your questions. The panel will be ready to answer a lot of questions as well. And so without any further ado, let me begin. So AESC is the global association that represents the executive search and leadership consulting profession. Our members are dedicated to strengthening leadership worldwide, and they understand the role that leaders, teams, and culture play in organization strategy success. Today's research is going to focus on just that: leaders, teams, and culture. So let's take a look and learn more about the research. So I'm going to begin by talking about leaders. Again, as Claire mentioned, we heard from 1,000 leaders around the world. I'll be presenting a global response, and every now and again I'll highlight specifics for the DACH region that may be a little bit different. If I don't highlight differences, it's because the responses are fairly similar. So the first thing I want to talk about is adaptation. Adaptation is about change. It's change to become better suited to the environment. In the last 2 years, we have certainly seen our share of change that we never thought we would have to deal with. And so that gets to the very first question we asked in the survey. And in the survey, we said, for each leader around the world, what are the strengths and competencies that you need, that you believe you will need post-pandemic? So not, generally what do leaders need or what do others need, but specifically yourself. And because we had a very strong representation of board and CEOs and C-suite, this was very representative. So number one was adaptability, and number two was agility. And I think it's really important to think about how these two words work together, because agile means move quickly, and adaptable means ability to change ideas, behaviors, deal with new situations. And so if you think about the last 2 years of a global pandemic that none of us have ever dealt with before, we certainly needed to be adaptable and we needed to be agile. Many of us had to pivot to a virtual environment in weeks, where we thought we would have years to do so. The responses were a little bit different for the DACH region. Adaptability was number 9 on the list. Agility was on the list, but at number 5 instead of number 2. I'm sorry, agility was, yeah, exactly. And so adaptability and agility were overall, from a global perspective, the strongest responses, but slightly different for the DACH region. In the DACH region, the top 5 in order were entrepreneurship, customer centricity, motivational, collaborative, and agile. And so that spirit of adaptability probably comes into play when you think about entrepreneurial and customer centric, but the word adaptable showed up much lower on the list. We also asked about change and whether you felt your organization was ready to lead change in strategic business areas. And so I would say overall, leaders would say their businesses are not ready for change. So we looked at the responses that were above average, so more than an average readiness for change. In general, 54% said they were ready for change. Not too bad, but just over half. DACH was 55%. Ready for change in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, overall 46%, DACH was 55%. Sustainability was 48%, and DACH dropped to 41%. And digital transformation was a surprising low for the DACH region. It was 47% overall and just 35% for the DACH region. So some things to think about. The scores are, in general, I would say that, you know, half of the leaders felt their organizations were not really ready for change. Scores under 50% and even 54% isn't that high. So something to think about, and maybe we can explore a little bit on the digital transformation side, where the numbers were even lower. We also asked, why do you believe organizations are still struggling with gender equality? And we call it out gender equality because it is a category that is consistent around the world, right? Half the population everywhere is female. And so there are lots of other categories of diversity, but in this case, we called out specifically gender equality. And here we see something interesting, and that is, you can see that the navy bar is culture and the plum bar is bias. Leadership popped up for the first time this year. And so you can see on 2020, we had bias and culture on the list, but we didn't have leadership. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that leadership showed up on the list, because if you think about why you're struggling with gender equality or any kind of equality and diversity, culture, bias, and leadership may be the reasons why you're struggling, but they're also the keys to success. And the fact that leaders are owning this and taking responsibility, I think, is very encouraging. So you can see next to 2021 where the responses for 2020 and leadership was not on the list. Also, you can see that for men and women, the top three were the same: culture, bias, and leadership. Men added lack of awareness, both had legacy structures. Women added pipeline challenge. So let's just see how the DACH region might be a little bit different. So you can see that bias, culture, and leadership were still on the list for the DACH region. But number one, and this was really interesting to explore further, is lack of urgency was number one. So why are we still struggling with gender equality? A lack of urgency. Again, bias, culture, and leadership were still on the list. Education challenge popped up, not quite sure why, because we find generally that men and women are equally educated. In fact, oftentimes women these days are even more educated than men. So, but lack of urgency came up as number one, and maybe that's what leaders need to figure out, is how do they light the fire to make this more urgent. So we'll look a little bit at culture now. And in culture, we asked one simple question, which is, what do you wish you could change about your culture? You know, what do you wish would be different? And of course, since these are the leaders of firms, wishing can make it true. So number one was better communication, and number two was stronger collaboration. Then more agility and more innovative. Women added more empowerment. Men added better alignment with strategy. And then I want to explain the underrepresented category. So we asked people around the world, do you consider yourself part of an underrepresented group? And the answer could be yes or no. If they said yes, then we put them in that category for purposes of looking at different responses. And you can see that those who identified as underrepresented, and we had this around the world, those who identified themselves as underrepresented added that they wish the culture had a stronger sense of trust. And you'll see in a few slides that we actually explore trust in more detail. So why better communication and stronger collaboration in terms of something you wish you could change about your culture? And my hypothesis on this is that in the time of a global pandemic, where we've all had to go virtual very, very quickly, communication and collaboration are probably the two biggest challenges, because we have to do things differently. We have to communicate differently. We have to collaborate differently. We certainly don't have the luxury of grabbing a cup of coffee. We didn't have the luxury of grabbing a cup of coffee or standing around a water cooler or whatever one does on a casual basis for communication and collaboration. And so we've had to do things differently. And I think that's why those two items are critically important and identified around the world as very, very important. And I might add that I didn't call out DACH region because your answers were quite similar. And so better communication and stronger collaboration are the two keys to what you wish you could change about your culture. We also asked about innovation. And this one was it was really interesting. And again, something perhaps that the panel will explore. But we asked whether you strongly agree that innovation is a top priority in your organization. Clients in Europe had the lowest response in this category, just 53%. Clients in North America had the high of 72%. Everyone else was in about the middle. By the way, we put an asterisk next to Africa only because we didn't have a large number of respondents, so we're not sure if it's truly representative. So something to explore further is the whole issue of innovation and whether it is or isn't a top priority. Again, clients said it's not. And so in Europe, it was rated pretty low. I mentioned that I was going to go back to trust, and we believe that trust is a key underpinning of culture. So we've heard about communication and collaboration, but we also think having a foundation of trust is critical. So what did we learn about trust? There is no significant difference in the DACH region. So this response is the global response, and there was no significant difference between the global response and DACH. There was also no significant difference between men and women. Where there was a significant difference is the underrepresented group, and I'll get to that in a moment. So what did we learn? 40% said the trust stayed the same in 2021. Didn't get better, didn't get worse, it stayed the same. 38% said that trust actually strengthened in 2021, and 22% said trust declined. But it's interesting to note that those who said that they were part of an underrepresented group said that 39% of them said that there was a decline in trust. And so I think this whole idea of inclusion is showing up here in trust. If you're part of an underrepresented group, and if you're not feeling included, and if the culture is more of one of exclusion than inclusion, you would think that trust declined. And so I think that that is something to really note and pay attention to. We also explored trust by role. One of the things we learned is that boards and CEOs are more positive about their organizations than anyone else. And so we talk a little bit about how they look at the world with rose-colored glasses. So boards and CEOs were more positive about trust. They said only 14% said trust declined. HR was less, 21%. So they were pretty much equal to the global response, which was 22%. But interestingly, that the finance area and the legal area said that trust declined to 37%. So a big change and a big drop. In fact, that's very similar to the response for those in the underrepresented groups. So what finance and legal know that boards and CEOs don't know is something really interesting to think about. We also asked how important is environmental sustainability to organization culture and leadership. Asia led at 74%, followed by Africa and Europe. The DACH region was at 59%. The US was in absolute last place at 35%. So really a poor showing for the country where I reside, and a little bit discouraging. Latin America was actually also quite low. We asked the same question about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll get to that slide in a minute. So what we asked is, how important is diversity, equity, and inclusion to your organization's culture and leadership? And you would expect, I would expect that diversity, equity, and inclusion would be central to culture and leadership. It may or may not be central to business strategy, but when it comes to culture, I would think diversity, equity, and inclusion was quite important. This slide actually shows the negative. So it says 23% in North America said diversity, equity, and inclusion is not central to organization culture and leadership. 29% in Europe said it is not important. It's not central. A whopping 33%, 1/3 of those in the DACH region said that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not central to organizations' culture and leadership. That score was the worst in the world, except Africa, where the respondents were, again, it was a low response rate. Latin America, 32%. So something going on here in terms of culture in the DACH region, and the understanding of the important role that creating a diverse and inclusive culture may play. Again, something to explore further. I mentioned that the CEOs and boards look at the world with rose-colored glasses. And here are a few examples where boards and CEOs saw the organization in a more positive light in a lot of different areas, whether agility is a strength, culture provides competitive advantage, women have an equal opportunity, developing next generation talent is a priority. In all of these cases, the boards and CEOs had a more positive response than other leaders in organizations. So let's explore strategy a little bit. We wanted to look at ESG principles. We used the terms used from Davos, people, governance, prosperity, and planet. And we asked, first of all, how important were each of these to your overall business strategy? So people includes dignity, equality, health, well-being. In terms of, and we asked them to rate it on a scale of 0 to 100, how important is this to your business strategy? People got a 75 point response. In the DACH, it was 69. I have to say I'm a little perplexed because I don't know many businesses where people isn't an absolute mission critical part of business strategy. But nonetheless, it was a 75 and it dropped to 69 in the DACH region. Governance was 74 and the DACH region was 73. Prosperity was 70, the DACH region was 63. And planet, anything related to sustainability was 61, so DACH was pretty much the same at 60. But we know that what gets measured gets managed, and so we also asked about measurement. And so if you say that people are important to your business priority, but you're not measuring, that would be an issue. And that had the strongest measurement response. So 81% globally said they are measuring in this category, 80% in the DACH. Governance, 65% globally said they are measuring, and 75% said they were measuring in the DACH region. So in general, across every single category, except people, it's a rounding error, across every single category, those in the businesses in the DACH region were much more likely to not only say that they have goals, but to measure against those goals. So prosperity was 51% globally, but a much higher 65% for the DACH region. And planet was 42% globally and a higher 50% for the DACH region. So in general, much more focused on measurement. And I think that's really encouraging. We also asked whether you're reporting publicly, but as you think about the clients who respond, some of them are public and some are private. So some don't report publicly in any case. So I'm not sure it's as important as setting goals and measuring. We asked about DEI progress and is your board composition reflective of your customer base? 39% said yes for boards. They agreed, or 9% of those strongly agreed. 48% agreed, or 12% strongly agreed to C-suite. So you can see that C-suite is actually more reflective of the customer base than the board. And then this one is actually two questions shown on one slide. So one question is, do you agree or strongly agree that women have an equal chance at attaining a leadership role in your organization? And the second is, do you agree or strongly agree that underrepresented people have an equal chance at attaining a leadership role? And so you can see that in Europe, 75% said women have an equal chance. It dropped just a little bit in the DACH region to 72%. 60% said underrepresented have an equal chance, same in DACH. The high for women was in the Pacific region at 85%. and the high for underrepresented was in Asia at 78%. The low in both was the Middle East, with Latin America also being quite low and underrepresented. So I would say that the DACH region was towards the higher end. One would hope that everybody would have an equal chance for leadership roles, given same equal skills and capabilities. So that's where we are. We're making good progress, but we're not there yet, I would say. We asked about readiness for digital transformation. And you'll remember that I had highlighted that the DACH region was lower in terms of feeling you were ready to drive change in digital transformation. And that showed up here as well. So we asked, how ready were you before COVID and how ready are you today? And overall, it went from 59 to 71% ready, a 12-point increase. The DACH region was 52% before and 66 today, so a bit of a drop on both accounts. And in general, boards and CEOs felt their organization was more ready. That sort of rose-colored glasses appeared here as well. And finally, we asked about flexible work environments. 20% plan to return to a physical office on a permanent basis. 67%, a whopping 67% said we're going to stay hybrid for the foreseeable future, and 12% said they would be mostly remote. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the audience in the DACH region, just to give you a sense of who was responding, and then I'll do a quick highlight and we'll go over to our panel. 100% of those who responded said that they were male. 26% skipped the question, so they didn't respond whether they were male or female. So it was a strongly male executive group. In the question of underrepresented, one person indicated that they felt they were underrepresented because they were female, one indicated disabled. But again, there were 26% just simply skipped the question. The majority were born between 1966 and 1976. There was broad industry representation, but the majority were industrial and manufacturing. 30% were CEOs, 12% were boards, 6% CFOs, 6% HR, 6% legal, 15% tech, and then there were a smattering of other roles. So you can see very, very strong showing in terms of the level and the response. So let's do a quick top 10 findings and then get onto the panel. We learned that leaders are adaptable and agile. The DACH leaders are entrepreneurial and customer-centric. We learned that culture, bias, and leadership are keys to gender equality, and I would say that they're keys to equality overall. Communication and collaboration are a top priority for culture improvement, followed by agility and innovation. Trust declined to 22% overall, but it was down 39% for those who are part of an underrepresented group. Boards and CEOs are more optimistic about organizations and C-suite, so maybe they need to do more listening to the organization to get a clearer perspective of what's happening. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is finally a top priority among leaders. Sustainability is lagging, especially in the Americas, and measurement needs more focus. A quarter of executives lack the confidence that women and underrepresented talent have equal leadership opportunities. It was even greater in the DACH region. Half say leaders are not ready to lead change in DEI, sustainability, and digital transformation. But digital transformation did accelerate by COVID, so you may not be ready to lead it, but it has improved. And finally, flexible work environments are here to stay. So I'm going to turn this back to Claire and our fabulous panel. So Claire, over to you.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your great insights there. And now we're going to have a very interesting conversation. So I'm just going to call in our panelists. We've got Klaus, Christine, Sandra, and Dieter. And so if you can just all turn back on your cameras so we can just see. Perfect, great. So thank you all for coming here. So what I would like you all to do, if it's at all possible, is for you to just give a brief introduction to yourselves and share with us your thoughts on the strengths and competence post-pandemic. Adaptability is, of course, what we talked about there, the ability to change, behaviors to deal with, and agile as well. They were ranked as the top 10 competencies globally. So I'd just like your thoughts on that. And if we can start, let me start first of all and call Sandra. If you could just introduce yourself, it would be great.
Yes, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Theisinger-Tüdenburg, and I'm an executive partner with Eblinger & Partner Executive Search in Vienna. We have been on the Austrian market for 30 years and are part of the Global Executive Search Network AESC Partners. My personal journey in executive search and leadership advisory started in 2003. In 2010, I joined an international banking group where I contributed in various international HR management roles in the CSEE region, where I was responsible for board recruiting, board services, and succession planning. And finally, after 11 years in the banking industry, I rejoined Eblinger & Partner last year. My consulting focus is executive search, executive coaching, and very selective advisory mandates in the field of strategic HR development, such as gender balance and inclusion. And my industry focus, well, based on my professional background, is the financial banking, financial and professional services. Yeah, when it comes to your question, my view on strengths and competencies post-pandemic, I don't want only to refer on the post-pandemic and the pandemic crisis, rather than on the times we're living in currently, which is very unpredictable and with a high degree of ambiguity, where leaders are facing imperfect information, multiple unknown, and need to respond quickly. I think more than ever, agile, innovative problem solving, experimenting, learning and adapting quickly, and collaborating is important to succeed in the long term. And this is true not only for digital organizations, this is true for to succeed in the long term. And I think the underlying strengths and competencies are, and this is a repetition of what you said, but also an add-on, is customer centricity, adaptability, curiosity, creativity, conflict, ambiguity, resilience, and emotional intelligence and empathy, just to point out some of them. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra, for that. Really appreciate. And let me now turn to Christine, if you could give a brief introduction to yourself as well.
Hello, Claire. Hello, Karen. I hope you can hear me. Claire, do you?
We do indeed.
Yes, well, we had some trouble with the technique here. I'm Christine Stempel. I'm a partner at Heidrick & Struggles, and I'm since 28 years in the business. And I would like to say something on behalf of the AESC first, because all of us here are in some way representing this association, and it's managed by Claire and by Karen, and us jointly with us. This is a platform for exchange of ideas, of developments in our profession as executive search consultants, and it's a very collaborative and very friendly environment. And this, I hope, is good to know for our clients who are friendly participants in this webinar today. And so I would like to welcome also all of our clients who have jointly agreed to be part of this. In Karen's presentation, we heard that there are some topics where the DACH region differs from the global results. And one of them was that in the global results, the client said adaptability and agility are foremost in their minds, whereas in the DACH region, the result is that entrepreneurship and customer centricity are the #1 topic, and actually agility, I think, comes, or adaptability comes sometime later. And we discussed this previous to this conference, and we said a small part of it may be due to the fact that adaptability translated into German is not such a positive term. Anpassung is maybe not what people want to be. So maybe there's some misunderstanding involved here too, but I think overall, the fact that entrepreneurship has become the #1 overall goal, I think that's quite outstanding. And my personal take on this is that has happened because Germany, and I think also Switzerland and Austria, have become environments where entrepreneurship in general is valued very high, even more than before. We always had the big mid-sized companies who were prominent in the industry and were the backbone of the industry. But today, you know, all the young and upcoming private equity-backed, VC-backed, smaller startups, they are what, you know, calls for attention and calls on everybody's interest. And if you go, for example, into a university and speak to students, which I'm sure many of our clients do as well, then you don't hear, I want to join industry, you hear, I want to start a company, I want to be a founder. So I think this has become an overriding topic in German economy, and as I said, potentially in Swiss and Austrian economy as well. And I think it will stay there going forward. And I'm, you know, curious to hear what my colleagues are saying about it.
Okay, well, thank you, Christine. It's great to have you with us. And now can I pass over to Detra, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce myself. Dieter Unterhanscheid. I'm partner at Spencer Stewart in the Frankfurt office. I'm in the professional in the executive search business since 28 years, 18 years with Spencer Stewart now, and another 10 years with another search firm before, and coming from the banking area. What we can see, especially after the pandemic, is the ongoing discussion about the office and being present in the office. Nearly every discussion with candidates and clients starts with that. How do you handle that in your company currently, and what do you expect? And most of the clients, especially those who are in the service industry or banking or whatever, assume that we will have at least a hybrid model. And in connection with that, they are discussing the question, how can we really evaluate our candidates? And most of the clients say we can't hire a person without having seen that person personally. In person means that really we have to have a face-to-face meeting before hiring a candidate. It's difficult if you are talking about international candidates coming from outside. It's difficult to travel, but if you have local candidates or European candidates, then usually you can organize having them face-to-face, whereby mostly often the first meeting is with a Teams meeting, and just the second and last one is then in person. That is something what we are discussing very often, and also how it makes sense. And so far also the business and the whole process has been changed. As it had described already, the process is much faster right now. The expectation of the clients is to have candidates in front of them within a very short time, because they say we skip the traveling, and so far we need more candidates, or we need a faster process. And so far I think that will keep going. I don't see any big changes also in the next few years. And also ourselves, we are also facing a hybrid model in our own organization, and surprisingly it works. And so far I think that's also a learning from the pandemic area, and it will also change I think the the client attitudes and also the culture in the companies, especially if it comes to culture. What we are seeing is that you have to find alternative models to keep or to stay very close to your colleagues and to your employees. That's something we are struggling because we need the personal relation. So far, we have to think about how to not just to onboard new colleagues, but also how to keep the colleagues happy and how to socialize internally. That's a question what we are also discussing with our clients and also internally.
Thank you. And I think we'll get back into a little bit more discussion on that, because I think the mobile world, the hybrid model is one of interest that we'll bring back to the table. But before that, Klaus, can I ask you just to introduce yourself? And I think it'd be great if you could follow up a little bit on what Christine was talking about the strengths and competencies post-pandemic. And we did have agility and adaptability as being top. And in the DACH region, we had entrepreneurship and customer-centric. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Klaus Hansen, I've been in the business now for the last 27 years, and I'm heading the chair and board practice in the German-speaking environment for August Bernson. And indeed, Claire, entrepreneurship and client centricity is something which is rated very high, and I think this is quite easy to explain because, well, in the German-speaking environment, the business relies really on the small and medium enterprises, not on the big corporate blue chips, in contrast maybe to other countries. And if you talk to entrepreneurs, I think they have already acted adaptable and agile before those words were invented or has become fashionable, because their understanding is that as an entrepreneur you always have to react in one way or the other to market conditions, changing market environments, etc. And of course COVID has shown that sometimes the markets change so drastically that everything you have set up as a strategy is for the waste bin. And I think one of the big findings is that if there's anything good in the COVID disaster, it's that it has brought out the best of leadership from all those leaders in any kind of business, because you suddenly had to start with remote business. Even some companies did not have the equipment to do video conferences, so you had to do it by telephone, SMS, whatever, and this has really separated the really good leaders from the wannabe leaders. And this is something, of course, which has affected our business as well, because clients were asking more and more for a different kind of leadership capabilities. And as Sandra, Christine, and Dieter has already given away quite a lot of findings, let me only add maybe one more. I think there's a huge change in loyalty from candidates toward the process. Very often, even very senior candidates go out of the process without any, let's say, smart excuses, because they have different alternatives and they didn't tell you before. And the loyalty of candidates joining a company has decreased significantly as well, simply because if you join a new company, and I mean, all you will meet and greet are people on a screen and Teams and Zoom and whatever, and you sometimes go to the office maybe once a week, and all those offices are empty. There is not really a grasp for the culture of the company, and so if another offer comes along with a better payment, people are quite relaxed to change jobs, because I mean they will see more of the same over there, but with a better salary.
I totally agree with you, Klaus, if I may say that. We also found all of us, all of our firms and all of the consultants have found that candidates are not only less loyal to the companies they join, they're also less loyal to our process, because it's easier for them. They don't have to come in for interviews. They don't have sometimes only once to go see the client during the interview process. And so they think, oh, this is an easy process, and they're much more open to jump in, but also much more open to jump out.
Yeah, they consume these processes. They're not really personally involved in that. It's a difference if you have to travel from Berlin to Düsseldorf for an interview, or if you just switch on your screen.
Yep, that's right.
So if we stay a little bit now on actually the mobile world, because I know we've been touching on that. So let's just stay on that for a moment. And I know that we, in our survey there and the results, we saw that there is, you know, a move to, yes, the hybrid market working rather than moving straight back into offices, etc. So what now, if I can just ask this, there's questions coming in relation to this, so hence I want to ask those to you. What about, I'd like to hear your views maybe, and so they're asking about attracting talent. We've talked about it being a candidate market, and maybe Detra, you can give us some tips on that. What are you seeing that's like for, in this mobile world now, attracting talent? And you're on mute.
I think Sandra probably didn't hear it. Sandra, did you hear the question?
Sorry.
I don't think she.
Should I start? Yeah, how to attract talent in this? Yeah, I mean, what we figure out in the recruiting processes is that offering kind of hybrid, any kind of hybrid models, yeah, is a prerequisite for candidates these days, yeah. Even to start to meet clients, yeah. This is what at least we figure out, yeah. Okay. And this is also true for top talents, yeah. So you can't say this is only for the younger generation. This is for each and every candidate. And if clients do not offer that, yeah, it's very hard for them to attract, really.
Yes. I think the problem I often heard is that during the pandemic, obviously, managers have stayed home. And now when a company says, I want you to move your family to, you know, be closer to our headquarters, then the family of the candidate says, no, you were able to work from this place during the pandemic, so why should we all root up and move now that the pandemic is over? So often it's not the manager resisting it, it's the family resisting it. And it's hard to counter argue that in that family discussion, you know, why should we move? And I think the world is falling into two pieces. At least that's my perception during the last couple of weeks and months. One side is the companies who are with their headquarters or their locations fairly remote in the country. And they understandably keep saying, we want people to move here, otherwise we're going to lose them 2-3 years later when they get a job in their hometown. And then there's the other fraction who are saying, we don't care where anybody sits as long as they come into the office as often as needed. And they can also work, say, Fridays from home. So, of course, that's a big attractive point. But who's the winner longer term is still to be seen. Because maybe the conservative clients are in the right corner who are saying we want them close so they stay longer term. So I think there's good and bad to both sides.
But what we definitely can see is that we have much more flexibility on the candidates in the candidates pool, having that opportunity of more mobility. And most of the question, or most of the candidates are raising the question, is there any chance to work from home at least, let's say, 1 to possibly 3 days per week? Myself working very intensively in the energy sector, what you know is a very conservative sector. Before pandemic, there was no question that a board member or a managing director has to move preferably with his family to the location, to the headquarters. And that has changed dramatically. And so that also these people say, okay, we have learned that also working hybrid and from home is possible. Not at all, not 5 days per week. And I fully agree on Christine saying they also want to socialize and onboard these people and have them in the office. But then there's much more flexibility saying you could also easily then work partly from home. You don't have to relocate. That makes things much easier. But on the other hand, it also raised the question, can we really trust that this person would stay the next several years? Is it 5 years, 10 years? On the other hand, I think the world is so quick that that's not the most important question, but it makes our life easier so that we could also approach candidates who we couldn't approach before pandemic in several industries.
So interesting that candidates are easier to attach and to attract. But if we come back to some of your clients, and you talked about some of the industries, is this hybrid world being embraced now by clients as we move forward? Because there is quite a lot of laggard industries that are maybe moved to this, but now hesitant to continue on. Are you seeing any signs of that, Christine?
Well, actually, there are some clients who really embrace it, who are saying, for us, it doesn't matter where somebody's located, as long as they do their job and they will know how to do their job well. It also depends on the role. I mean, for example, the human resources function is a very central function to any organization, and consequently, they are expected to be role models. So from human resources managers, it's usually expected to be close by and very visible. Whereas, if you're in a specialist function, like, in the life sciences industry, you have a lot of regulatory people or quality people. For them, it's perhaps less important. So it depends. And I think it's an evolving process we're watching here.
And I think it's one thing to really proclamate hybrid working for everybody, and it's another thing to walk the talk. Because especially in companies which have a huge amount of, let's say, productive operations, where a lot of blue-collar workers who have to come to the plant every morning, it's very difficult for the culture that the back office people can stay at home 2, 3, 4 days a week, and the blue-collar workers have to come to the plant. And I think there is not a simple answer how to deal with that yet. And it's a matter of leadership, how you deal with that. And I think you have to start from the very top, that you show people that you will be around whenever it is needed, but that you all also accept and allow people to stay at home when they are not needed, just in front of their subordinates.
Yes.
Thank you. And if we move to, we talked a little bit about trust. And trust is key to underpinning culture. And the Elderman Trust Barometer has highlighted that people are trusting more employers than the governments during the pandemic. And I'd like to ask you this, Dietra, what are you hearing from candidates, our clients, in relation to trust?
It was interesting to see the results of the analysis, saying that especially in the finance department, obviously trust is an issue, whereby the CEOs and the managing directors don't worry about trust too much, just 14% if I got it right. It is indeed a discussion, and what we could see clear is that there was a development during the pandemic. In the beginning, it was a big question: can we really trust our employees? Do they really work as hard as we could see them, as we could see it being in the office? And many executives had the feeling we have to see our employees really to believe that they are working hard. But that changed during the pandemic. After, I would say, half a year or 1 year, they felt comfortable saying, okay, we have really the feeling that we can trust our employees. Okay, they changed their working times. We receive now emails during the night, maybe because they have changed their lifestyle, or also because of the children, whatsoever. But nevertheless, they said the outcome of the work is nearly the same. So far, trust is not that big issue. And insofar, I was really surprised seeing that obviously it is an issue, especially in the finance department of several companies. I don't see that too much. And also, if I look into our own organization, we have no problems, and I have no doubts that we can fully trust our people. And we don't see any decrease in the outcome whatsoever.
And Sandra, do you have anything that you'd like to add on to that?
Yes, I would like to add or bring in the point what really creates trust, yeah, what builds trust. And I think trust is not between a leader and his employees. And I think, I mean, trust is not built overnight. Trust is established over time. And what I think, based on what I hear from candidates, is that credibility in the leadership behavior is key. Yeah, and here I would like to refer to one conclusion revealed by Edelman, yeah, by this Edelman trust parameter. One conclusion was lead with facts and act with empathy. And my interpretation is, when it comes to the credibility of leadership behavior, that leaders who anticipate future needs, demonstrate accountability and a maximum of transparency in the decision-making process, provide reliable fact-based information, and communicate by also showing vulnerability and emotions, might create trust and commitment. I think this is a very important thing if we talk about credibility in the leadership behavior. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Sandra, there's one word you mentioned that's very true. That's transparency.
Yes.
Because if leaders are to be trustworthy or perceived as trustworthy, it means that they do not always have to take decisions that are, you know, liked by everybody, but they have to be transparent about why they take them. So I think that's also a big difference to the culture of companies some years back, or 10, 20 years back, or maybe more years back, when leadership was in a way that, you know, they felt they need to be strong and credible and, you know, do something, and not too much explain it. And I think given an explanation about what we are doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it, that's the key to create trust today and going forward.
Yes.
So Christine, we have a question coming here, but I think to help with the answer of it, the question that we have had come in is, what are you expecting regarding leadership from home? So what would be a quick tip that you would give any leader who's now working?
Yes, I do have one. We discussed this previously also in this group, and there's one thing that is more asked for than before, and it's the word that's used a lot these days. It's empathy, because, you know, a technical instrument like a Zoom or a Teams conference is a very distant instrument. So it's not as close as sitting in a room. So what a leader today needs to do is to read people better. You know, he needs to know them better and to read what they're saying and how they're saying it better. Because in a video conference, people easily get lost. They start looking at their iPhones, they no longer listen, they're just participating, but they're not really there. And if a leader continues to ramble on and doesn't see what's happening with those around and doesn't involve them, ask them to participate, you know, calls on single people, or also talks about personal subjects sometimes in this online version, which may seem awkward at the beginning, but I think that's a key to create a warm atmosphere in a cold technical instrument.
Thank you very much for that. Klaus, if I can just move to you now. When we looked at the survey when it came to ESG, the survey shows that the DACH region is higher than the global result in measuring ESG goals. What are you hearing from your clients in relation to measurements of ESG goals and sharing this publicly?
Yeah, it didn't really come as a surprise to me that because we Germans always love to measure things, and I think when it comes to ESG, you have to differentiate between the E, the S, and the G. But there are always, I think, three initial questions every, let's say, company is raising before dealing with these topics. The first one is, how urgent is this topic? Secondly, is it measurable, and how good is it measurable? And thirdly, what's the expected impact of this criteria for the company as a whole, or for me as a CEO or head of HR, whatever? And I think if you look at it, all the E for environmental criteria are measurable very well, and you can really, you know, market this over the social medias. And if you look on LinkedIn or Xing or whatever, you can see that sorry, these days 90% of those posts are around saving the planet, making it a better place, and reducing your carbon footprint here and there, because this is easy to measure, and you can give yourself a goal, 10% less next year, etc., and can be measured. So this is, let's say, very well received, and this is publicly very well received as well. When it comes to S, it's more an internal measurement. So how well the relationship between the employees and the employer, and all these things which are not so much put on social media yet, I think. But when it comes to the G topic, and this is really surprising for me, of course, this is the least thing you really can measure in, let's say, transparent way. But for me, it's the most important thing, because I personally believe that having a good governance is the mother of all goodness. And because a good governance will entail all the others, the S and the G and the diversity and inclusion things as well. But many companies, and that's what I hear from our clients very often, is you start the other way around. You start to do, you know, things which are obviously good and which can be put to market quite easily, and only then go to the governance topic. And I think it should be the other way around.
Interesting. No, thank you very much for giving those insights, because it is very much a hot topic, and as you rightly said, Germans like to measure, so it is great that we see that, and also we see that in the Nordic area as well, that there's a lot of measurement going on. I know we're pressed now for time, but we can't not refer to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that bringing especially women on executive boards is a key focus for the German market. But Christine, is there more to DE&I than gender?
Yes, actually there is. I was reading about the D&I results previous to this conference, and I thought what has really changed is the acceptance of older candidates. If you look back, unless you were at a C-level role, a candidate above 55 was not having many chances anymore. And this has definitely changed. In the war for talent, also the older candidates have come out as winners, particularly if they're in a specialist function, a top-level specialist function, which is rare to find. Coming back to my example from earlier, the regulatory people, which are an asset. I found that, for example, in a search for a global head of regulatory I did last year, where we had candidates from both Europe and the US, there were a lot of 60+ year women in regulatory in the US who actually made a business of filling that role for 2 or 3 years for a company before moving on to the next role in the next company. So they have realized that their special knowledge and experience is being asked for more than when they were younger, because of the relationships and everything. And I thought it was like a bulb going on in my brain. I thought, this is really a change. And it's also a change that will come to Germany, or the German or European environment, that this is, if there's a function where people are needed to have a long-term experience, that they hire older people. So I think, same as with women, I think that's, maybe I'm concerned personally, but it's really, a new topic to the scene, and I think that's a positive development.
Thank you very much, Christine, for sharing that, because we do have to look at, diversity at large and not just focusing on gender. There's so many strains to it. I want to thank you all for giving us the time today and giving in your insights. But I think I'd like to ask you just to do one quick thing before we actually close up. I'd like you to give us all your tip to the leaders that is listening to us today. Your tip is on how to actually embrace and move forward in these turbulent times that we're actually going through again. So can I start with you, Sandra? What quick tip would you give to leaders today?
I would like to get back to the topic of diversity, and in this respect to gender balance. And my tip would be to any leaders, be it HR or be it CEOs, ensure diversity in your teams by taking real accountability to recruit, develop and retain female talents. This is very important.
Thank you, Sandra. And Klaus, have you got a quick tip that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, if you want to keep your best talents, whenever you think you should pick up the phone, do not take the phone, but put on the VC at least, so that you not only can talk to your people, but see them, even though, like Christine said, it's not the same, let's say, exchange of empathy like sitting together physically. So talk, and look.
Thank you, Klaus. And Dieter?
I would suggest that they should trust their people and feel confident that they really know what to do, because they are much more self-responsible than maybe some of us think. What also should be done is to keep an eye on the socializing and to create opportunities for the people who are working from home or not being in the office, how they could meet so that they keep the relationship. That is very important.
Thank you. And Christine, your quick tip.
Well, Claire, I'm everly positive, so I think people should stay positive, open, and embrace agility, be open for new things, new developments, new tools, and transfer that to your people, because, the world is not staying still and we need to move with it. So just go for it.
Okay. So thank you, and thank you all for joining us, and I thank our audience here today, and I do encourage you to take the time to look at the AESC website, where you'll find some great insights from all of our members that are in the DACH region that share that there. So thank you so much, and we look forward to having continued business with you. Thank you.